Hey everybody, Chris, the old-ass retro gamer here. I am back today with another gigantic collaboration video. And this is one that has been a long time in the making. You have no idea all the different delays, and I had surgery on one of my eyelids, people dropping in and out of being one of the guest stars on the episode, and I'm glad that I can finally present it to you. So I am here today with another 10 special guests, some returning from previous collaborations, some which are completely new to my channel. And who is participating this time, you might ask? Shelton of Retro Games, Vinyl and Beer, Will Graham, the Gorilla Gamer, Power Metal Gamer, Dragoon Loggy, Musty Hobbit, Jason from Corpse Flood Gaming, Mosley from Drunken Master Studios, Radical Reggie, Michael B. the Game Genie, and Kinsey Burke. I am so excited they were all able to participate. And what is the topic? I normally do these gigantic collaboration videos when I'm doing something that is movie themed. I'm a huge movie fan, I'm a filmmaker, as I've said plenty of times on the channel, and I love talking about movies, although this isn't really the channel where I get to do that, but my way of talking about my love of film is by talking about movie-themed video games. And I've done 2 collaborations where I've had others chime in on good games based on movies. Today we are going down the rabbit hole of craptastic games based on movies.
Oh man! Oh god! Oh man! Oh god! Oh man! Oh god! Oh man!
Licensed games are not a very popular genre. I am not one of those people that automatically thinks licensed games are garbage. I'm actually willing to give them a shot, especially if it's based on a movie that I really enjoy, which is kind of why I have as many licensed games in my collection as possible, because I'm such a huge film fan. I kind of consider the games to be a collector's item based on my love of that film. But I will admit that at least 75% of all licensed games are trash. I'm an adult, I can admit it, and that is what today's topic is all about. The dregs of licensed games. Before I talk about my first game, let's hear from 2 of my guests, Sheldon from Retro Games, Vinyl and Beer, and Will Graham, the Gorilla Gamer.
Hey, my name is Shelton, and I have a YouTube channel called Retro Games, Vinyl and Beer. Today I want to talk about my least favorite video game that's based on a movie, and that would definitely go to Terminator 2 Judgment Day on the Super Nintendo. On the arcade and the Sega Genesis, I actually got a pretty cool arcade game where it's like a light gun shooter. For some reason on the Super Nintendo, they gave us a really terrible platformer. It was actually put out by LJN, who has made multiple terrible games in the past. And this one in particular is just awful. The controls are really bad, hit detection's terrible, graphics aren't that great, and the music especially is just awful. There's some parts of the game where the soundtrack is like a full-on country twang type thing, which really doesn't go with the Terminator vibe at all. I'm a huge fan of the movie series, and I was really disappointed by this game. I actually picked it up a few years ago when I first started collecting games, and I paid only 99 cents for it. And still at that price, I was completely disappointed with it. There's really just no redeeming qualities of it, and it's just something I do not recommend at all. It's also really difficult too. I've only gotten to probably like the 3rd or 4th level, and haven't gotten further than that. Not that I would want to play it ever again, because it is just really a terrible game overall. If you want to play a Terminator game, I'd probably go with Terminator on the Sega CD. That one's really good. Then also RoboCop vs. Terminator on the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis are great as well. But avoid this game at all costs. Even if you see it for $5 or less, it's not worth having in your collection. That was my general thoughts on the game. Thanks for having me on your channel, Chris, and we'll see you next time.
I know now why you cry.
Hey, what's going on? It's Will Graham, the Gorilla Gamer. Thanks for stopping in. And these are my choices for my top 3 choices for worst movie-adapted video games. So number 1, let's jump right in. Number 1 is going to be Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Man, how many things can I mean, I could go on all day about why I hate this game. It starts right up from the horrible, stiff controls. It is a side-scroller, and it is one of those games that you could just hear the creative think tank going on while producing this game and going, well, it takes place in in New York, and he's lost in a hotel, so let's just throw everything that a hotel has at this character, Kevin, in this game. We'll throw bellhops, we'll throw vacuum cleaners, we'll throw light switches. It is horrible. Horrible game, and I think this is what single-handedly killed Macaulay Culkin's career, was this turd right here. Number two is it was a hard one for me to pick out of these two because I like both movies. This movie I liked a little more, but the game, wow, and that is Total Recall. Total Recall, wow. The movie's great and has some of my best, most amazing quotes. I love this movie. But this game it's hard to understand. It's a side scroller, and it's like they took Trojan, right, and tried to fix up Trojan or something. I don't know, but it just comes out horrible execution. It's ugly to look at. The music is boring and it just loops. Bad game. Horrible. Sorry, Schwarzenegger. This one's a turd. And finally, number one is going to go to my boy Stallone for Cliffhanger. Yeah, Cliffhanger. This game here, again, see, most movie games have a problem with taking themselves too literal, right? Like, on this one, Cliffhanger, really, I would have rather have been Stallone hanging from the side of a cliff for 8 hours than to have played this game. It's another side-scroller, and you have to go around through the events where you're Gabe, the mountain climber, and you gotta, there's guy, if you've seen the movie, poor execution. Just Google it. Google it, look up some pictures, but don't buy it. Don't buy it. Anyway, thanks, Chris, for having me in on this, man. I loved it. And see you guys next time. Lates.
You're waking the neighbors! Shut up!
So the first game I'm going to talk about that I find to be a worthless game based on a movie is The Lawnmower Man for the Sega CD. And I've talked at great length in other videos about my love of the Super Nintendo version of The Lawnmower Man, but this is an entirely different beast. This game is nothing like the Super Nintendo game at all. I would hardly classify this as a game. Like with all Sega CD games, it is mostly full motion video cutscenes, either of scenes taken directly out of the movie or ones created in CGI specifically for the game, which I will admit are kind of cool. But when it comes to the game, oh my god. It's basically just a bunch of QuickTime events that remind me of either playing Dragon's Lair or Sewer Shark. Some of them are puzzles that make absolutely zero sense. Some of them are just random pick a path. Out of the three that we're going to lay out for you, pick one of these paths. It is just long, drawn out. All the scenes from the movie just kind of are thrown into the game for no reason at all. Yes, the music is kind of cool. It's just, obviously 90s techno-y stuff, which is kind of rad. And the graphics can be pretty cool when it comes to the cutscenes, but when it comes to the in-game graphics, which are all CGI also, they are just bottom of the barrel. It's not fun. Like, at all. Sales Curve, who developed this as well as the Super Nintendo and Genesis versions, just completely abandoned what they had created before in lieu of making something that just took advantage of the CD format. If it was me, I would have done a redo of the Super Nintendo game with better graphics, better sound effects, better music. And can you imagine what the 3D versions of those virtual reality scenes would have looked like on a Sega CD game? That would have been awesome. But nope, they dropped the ball and just looked like they shat this out in about a week.
I am God here.
So next, let's hear from Power Metal Gamer and Dragoon Loggy.
What is up, Chris, and thank you for having me back on the old ass Retro Gamer again. We did a kind of collaboration video before and I loved them, they're so fun. And guys, if you haven't checked out the old collaboration video it was called Good Games Based on Movies, and there's a lot of awesome people in it like Radical Reggie and all that. So, without further ado, let's go do the polar opposite. We're going to go bad movies based on games. And I've got my shit-crusted mountain right here, Chris. How dare you make me dig these out? God damn. I feel sick touching them. I don't know why they're in my collection, but they're there. You gotta... Sometimes it's nostalgia that ties you to this. Well, first of all, we're going to go for Batman Forever, the arcade game on the PlayStation 1. And why was this game so bad? Let me talk about it for a moment. It was developed by Iguana, they were an in-house company for Acclaim. Acclaim did, all the digitized stuff, like with the motion capture, and they put the actors in the games. The game is based off Batman Forever, as you know, which was a 1995 movie with Val Kilmer, Jim Carrey, Tommy Lee Jones, and so on. And this game was released 1 year after that came out, and it's a side-scrolling kind of beat-em-up in the vein of like Streets of Rage and Final Fight. Why is this game not good? Well, the hit detection is absolutely horrendous. There's so much shit going on the screen at once. The enemies, some of them are overpowered and they gang up on you. The abilities and the special attacks, it's just so strange. And especially if you do like a 2-player kind of mode, it feels like there's so much shit going on at the screen at once. You always can't pay attention to everything. This is what's similar to, right? It's like having sex in a lavatory on a plummeting plane going into the side of a mountainside, and it's really not cool. The game is terrible, and I just really don't like it. It's probably just me. It's my cousin hates it as well. Anyways, the next one on my list, again, Chris, you're making us do this. Oh god, it's killing me. But the next one on the list is The Lost World. It was done by DreamWorks Interactive and it was published by the Dick Riders over at EA. Woo! So yeah, fuck them. But anyway, it's a side-scrolling 2.5D platformer where you get to play as dinosaurs. And for the last 3 levels of the game, you get to play as a human, but you're running away from people. But anyways, God, I'm just thinking about how disgusting that game is. I will give it one thing though. The graphics are really good. The dinosaurs are really animated on par with the movie, so they look really well. But let me talk about the game. It's just shit. You know that you might be fooled sometimes by the camera when it's gone sideways and it's like the 2.5D, but the camera will kind of switch around when you're in certain areas, especially crucial areas where you got to jump up platforms and stuff like that. But the camera will go on a weird kind of angle. Remember the way, any of you guys ever play a game on PlayStation 1 called Pandemonium? The way the camera will kind of go weird around, like a weird trick that it'd have. That goes like that in this game, but like it goes like when you jump platforms, you fall into an endless pit or you'll take fall damage. And it was just totally unfair. The thing about the game as well is it had no save features. Don't know what they were doing. Who the hell thought that in 1997? Like, we could save stuff then. But if you died, you basically start the level again. Yeah, that's your own business. When I was a kid, I got this game. So it wasn't this version. This is the classics version. It's kind of like the greatest hits if you're in America. On the back of the case, it said, "You are the T-Rex," in big fucking letters. And I was all excited as a kid. I was like, oh yeah, I get to play as the T-Rex. But when I got home, I turned it on and I got to play as a Compysaurus. What you call them? Compsognathus? Composagnus. You know the little compy things, the things from the movie that run around. They're about the size of a cat. The little small dinosaurs. But you play as one of those for 9 levels. That's like literally nearly a quarter of the game. The controls are clunky. The enemies do a lot of damage. The game's design is just totally unfair. You will resort to using cheats. The frustration getting through all those levels, you just want to play as T-Rex. That's the fun part of the game. I'm not going to talk about it anymore, but I'm just going to leave this here because this is another pilot wank, and I'm out, man. Good day, sir.
Oh yeah, that's how it always starts. But then later there's running and screaming.
This is why Superman works alone.
Hi guys, I'm Dragon Lagi. I will do a video for the old ass retro gamer. Bad games based on movies. It's a very hard time to come up with one because I don't have played many movie games. So yeah. But I have found one and I was very disappointed in this game because I like this movie so much, I still do. And that is James Cameron's Avatar, the game. I think it's very maybe not very bad, but it's also not a very good game. So first of all, I did not really like the graphics. They were not maybe that bad, but still they were not very good. The gameplay was not very fun at all. I totally did not get the feeling from the movies. I did not play that much of the game, but still, yeah, very disappointed. And I really hoped on a very good Avatar game because I really love the movie. But no dice. But yeah, this was my bad game based on a movie. And yeah, see you!
You see that?
Yes, sir.
No, you didn't. You were looking at the monitor.
Spoiler alert for my next pickup video. So the next game I'm going to talk about is for the Sega Genesis. I saw it at a half-price books, and I think it was like $4. And I said, what the hell? It can't be that bad, can it? Oh yeah, it can. Cutthroat Island on the Genesis. Just like the movie it's based on, this is kind of worthless. It's a side-scrolling platformer beat-em-up type game, which is just really badly designed. The graphics throughout the entire game are just bland and plain and average looking. Nothing looked like it took more than an afternoon to program. The character animations are choppy and the play control is really, really bad. The hit detection kind of sucks, and the game is really, really, really hard. I mean, it takes effort to beat the first level, and I've only gotten to, I think, level 3 in this game, which is one of the reasons why I dislike it as much as I do, because I don't even feel compelled to keep pushing forward in the game to see where it goes, because I despise it so much. Just like the movie, it's about a bunch of pirates. You can play as 2 different characters. Morgan, who was Gina Davis in the movie, or Shaw, which was Matthew Modine. Horrible casting, by the way. And you're crappily swashbuckling your way through however many levels there are in this game. Sure, there are some cool sections that are taken directly from the movie, like you get to fight on top of a horse-drawn carriage, and you get to use Morgan's little 3-bladed parrying knife thing, which I always thought was kind of cool in the movie. But outside of that, this is just a very bland, generic beat 'em up that just is not entertaining in any way, shape, or form. Why do I still have it in my collection if I dislike it so much? Where am I going to get 50 cents for it if I sell it? Might as well just keep it in the collection. So now let's hear from Musty Hobbit and Jason from Corpse Flood Gaming.
Hello everyone, I am Musty Hobbit, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank Chris for inviting me on to contribute to this video, the worst video games based on movies. And when Chris asked me this question, I struggled with the answer a little bit. I have played a lot of video games. I have just been a gamer since the Atari 2600, and when I really put some thought into it, there was one game that stuck out, one that I had played a lot of when I was a kid, because when you were young, your parents would get what they could get, and if it was a game that you found at a garage sale, that was it. And so one of the games that I played a lot actually is one of the more iconic movie licensed games in history, and it actually has quite a reputation. This game is blamed for the video game crash of 1983. This game itself is labeled as horrible, and if you don't already know what I'm talking about, it's E.T. for the 2600. Now, I will say that this game is challenging, and this game is really not put together great. It obviously could be better, but I still kind of like this game. I still kind of love this game. I used to play this a ton, and although I don't know that I've ever beaten it, this game just kind of is cemented in my memory as one that I have sunk a lot of time into. So, again, it is something that is not the best, and it will, be part of the history of Atari forever because of the landfill and because of all of the other sort of stories and urban legends that circulated around this game. But with that said, this game is still one that I display proudly in my collection, and one that I will hang on to forever. So that'll about do it for me. Again, if you are interested in hearing more from me, you can check my YouTube channel out, Musty Hobbit. I can also be found on the Cartridge Club website. I'm a contributor there, which is www.cartridgeclub.org. I have been Musty. Take care of yourself. Be good to each other. Bye.
You should give him his dignity.
Hey guys, Jason here, also known as Corpse Flood from the channel Corpse Flood Gaming, and I'm here today to talk about a topic very near and dear to my heart, and that is terrible games based on movies. As a child of the 80s and early 90s, naturally I've played a lot of movie-based games, and a terrible game based on a terrible movie is pretty much to be expected. You're like, why'd they even bother? But a terrible game based on an awesome movie is just heart-wrenching and a tragedy for anyone involved. And I've probably played some worse games based on movies than the one I picked, but nothing has stabbed me in the heart like my selection, and that is Ghostbusters for the NES. I love Ghostbusters. It's one of the very first things I fell in love with in my life. I loved everything about it. I was always watching the real Ghostbusters. I loved the first movie. I even loved the second movie, unlike a lot of people. I had a Ghostbusters lunchbox, everything, obsessed. So imagine my disappointment when I finally fired up Ghostbusters on NES. I was at a buddy's house and I saw it, and I was like, oh my god, Ghostbusters, this is gonna be awesome.
What? No!
I have never been more wrong. It's boring, it's repetitive, it has a terrible rendition of the theme song, and even the start screen with it is pretty much foreshadowing into the crap you're about to experience. If you somehow power through the rest of the game and get into the Gozer building, you'll be lucky to get past the stairs. Even at 32, I can't do it, so let alone being a 5-year-old trying to do it. It was one of the very earliest heartbreaks of my life. And there's also the Sega Master System version, which is a graphical and musical upgrade. It plays slightly better. It's a little bit easier, but it's still pretty much a polished turd as far as I'm concerned. They also put out the sequel on NES, which is slightly more of an actual video game, but still pretty crappy and short. So I went my whole life thinking, oh, there's not really any good retro Ghostbusters game. That's a bummer. It's because I didn't play the Game Boy version, which is pretty cool. Not the best. And I also believed that the Sega Genesis version was just a port of the NES one, which might sound a bit better, and I never had a chance to even try it. So I just grew up thinking, there's no good Ghostbusters games on NES. Unfortunately, that wasn't true, but it was true for North America. HAL Laboratories saw fit to do the new Ghostbusters 2, and it's pretty awesome. I've only got to recently experience it because it never came out here, but it's there's definitely a good NES game. You'll have to buy a repro of it, or hack your NES Mini to play it, or emulate it some other way, but it's worth the work, definitely. So, not knowing about the Sega game, or obviously the European game, I went my whole life going, there's no good Ghostbusters games, until this game came out. Ghostbusters video game is essentially the third movie. They got all the cast back except Rick Moranis and Sigourney Weaver, but all the original Ghostbusters are there, and it's awesome. It's everything I've ever wanted in a Ghostbusters game. So this story has a happy ending. As far as this goes, though, avoid it at all costs. Even Louis Tully has better options.
So you want to play Boggle or Super Mario Brothers?
Anyways, guys, like I said, this game is terrible. Avoid it, but it's also not the worst thing to happen to the franchise. So there's that. I'd like to thank Chris, the old ass retro gamer, for having me on. You guys have a great day.
So the next game I'm going to talk about is based on a movie which I absolutely adore. Darkman for the NES. I should have seen it coming. It's by Ocean. A lot of other YouTube gamers all talk about a specific developer that they don't like. Like the Angry Video Game Nerd always talks about how much he hates LJN. The one that I dislike is Ocean. Why? Because all their games kind of feel and look the same. Main characters are always really blocky and big and have a huge hitbox. The characters all control like they're walking on ice. The platforming is terrible, the level designs are always usually pretty bad, and jumping is incredibly imprecise. It's like the Ocean formula, and Darkman falls squarely within that equation. Sure, environments and scenarios are taken out of the movie. That's expected. I at least expected to be able to control this game. If you thought the jumping in the Terminator for NES was terrible, you have yet to see how bad it can get. The people who developed this game are frickin' sadists. They put platforms just a hair out of reach. You have to absolutely perfectly time that jump to the final pixel of the platform you are standing on before you hit that button, and you might land on your destination platform. Darkman is just the one that disappoints me the most because how much I love the movie that it is based on. So this was so disappointing to me when I finally got my hands on it a few months back. I was like, well, maybe this will be the Ocean game to make me think they might have actually known what they were doing back in the day. They just had a few stinkers on their hands. Nope!
I'm learning to live with a lot of things.
So if you were like me, and you really loved the Darkman film, and you see this sitting on the shelf at some local retro video game store, and you say to yourself, I wonder if that game is actually be good. No! Slap yourself across the face, turn around and walk out. Don't say I didn't warn you. So let's go to my next pair of guests, Mosley from Drunken Master Studios, and Radical Reggie!
Oh, hello. Almost didn't see you there. So you have an interest in crappy games, right? I'm going to take the fact that you made it this far into this sexy collab as a resounding yes. It took me a while to narrow down my game, and it's kind of a game that a lot of people seem to not even realize exists. It's based on what is arguably one of the worst movies of all time, though it has achieved some cult status in the years since its release. It was developed by Gremlin Software in the UK and by Konami in the United States, and it came out in 1992 for the Amiga, the Atari ST, and DOS operating systems. What game, you ask? Plan 9 from Outer Space, baby. So as you can see, Plan 9 from Outer Space is a point-and-click adventure game. Fun fact, certain releases of the game, the rarer release, actually came with the movie that it takes its name from. So not only did you get a crappy game, but you got a crappy movie as a bundled deal, which in and of itself is part of the reason why I made this my singular choice. Overall, it's your average point-and-click adventure fare. It plays pretty well for the most part, other than the fact that none of the puzzles are intuitive. Playing it without a walkthrough is about as fun as a root canal. And it manages, this is a direct quote from reviewers at the time, it manages to somehow come across even cheaper than the movie that it's based on. Which, you know, it's really true. It's uncertain if that's intentional or if it just happened. It comes across a lot more like it's making fun of the movie than it's actually paying homage to it. Overall, the plot is that Bela Lugosi's double, those of you familiar with Plan 9 know that Bela Lugosi, I think, died before he was even in the movie. They had some footage of him, and then they used a double for the rest of the movie and billed it as Bela Lugosi. Well, the plot of the game is that guy has came and taken all the reels of Plan 9. You got to collect the reels in different movie sets from the film and put the movie back together, essentially, while making sure he hasn't tampered with it at all. Overall, the general attitude of the game is pretty much going to alienate at least half of the people that are fans of the actual movie. And I think by this point in '92, it hadn't quite achieved the cult status to where this game would have been a bestseller or anything. If this game came out now, it would be kind of ironic. It coming out back then just seems like a parasitic cash grab to make a little bit of money off of a film that was achieving some cult status by that time in history. Is it the worst video game based on a movie? Probably not. But it's uniquely crappy in a unique kind of way. And much like the movie that is its namesake, it deserves a place in history for being a unique piece of crap based on an even more unique piece of crap that most people will probably never play. So there it is, folks. If you're a fan of Plan 9, I would say maybe pick it up as a curiosity. If you're not, avoid it, because it's just not a good point-and-click adventure game. One thing it was criticized for is just having an overall cheap layout, which, as you saw, is pretty much true. And the puzzles not being intuitive, which I can say from experience is pretty much key in any point-and-click game. You should be able to solve the puzzles on your own at some point, and you can do that a lot of the way through Plan 9. But for the most part, it's like pulling teeth. It's just no fun at all. So, unless you're like a rabid Plan 9 fan, avoid it like the plague, folks.
What plan will you follow now?
Plan 9.
Plan 9. Ah, yes. Plan 9 deals with the resurrection of the dead.
So, the worst video game movie that I've ever... There's so many of them, but ones that I own, of course, are... I had to get the PAL version of Men in Black. Now, this is exclusive to PAL territories. It's not the one we got in America. That one was based off of the cartoon or something else. I can't really remember. But this one's based off the first movie. And if you played games like Resident Evil or, what's the game? City of Lost Children, you'll somewhat know what to expect here. The game is it could have been really good, but I'm guessing the developers didn't really have that much time with it. Here's an example of something. In the part of the game, you fall in a dumpster, right? The dumpster is like 4 feet high, so normally if you were in a dumpster and you want to get out, you hop over it, right? You know, that's 4 feet high. That's not bad. You know, you jump over, or you look for a button to push, to open the door. No, you can't do either of those things. So you're stuck in the dumpster trying to find out what you have to do. And then you find out that you have to kick it open, which doesn't make any damn sense. You know, that's the last thing anybody would do. So it's like weird stuff like that kills the pacing in the game. I bought it because it was $5, and I love PAL games, but geez, just stay away from this game.
So the next So the next game I'm going to talk about is based on another movie that I absolutely adore. Actually, the first time I saw this movie in the theater, I absolutely hated it. The trailers made it look like it was going to be this epic science fiction film that was kind of like Dune or like 2001, and I go to see it and it's kind of like a science fiction comedy. It's not what I wanted. But I did watch it again because I had promised 2 different groups of friends that I would see it with them. So I reluctantly went to see it again the next day, and it actually grew on me. And Mila Jovovich in a body harness. Yeah. You know it's The Fifth Element. If the movie is that amazing to me, why did I find this game to be as bad as I did? Let's talk about that. What was a super popular PlayStation 1 franchise? Tomb Raider. Of course, everyone and their mother wants to mimic that franchise because it's a moneymaker. Callisto decided to adapt The Fifth Element into the Tomb Raider mold, and they did it in a horrible way. As we all know, the camera in the Tomb Raider games is not good, and it is even worse here because the areas you play in are so small, the camera's always getting caught on something, blocking your view, getting caught on a polygon and like zooming in on your character's ass. The controls are sluggish and they're barely responsive. And on top of it all, this is one of the ugliest games on the PlayStation 1. Sure, the PlayStation 1, everything is blocky and pixely and everything looks like it's made out of crazy angled triangles, but they managed to make this movie that looked gorgeous and beautiful into this fugly, back alley abortion of a game. You can play either as Corbin Dallas, which was Bruce Willis, or Lilu, which was Mila Jovovich. Yum! And yes, you do go through locations from the movie, which also is pretty cool in this game, but just everything else about it is such a slog. The levels are way too long, way too much imprecise platforming, because the controls when it comes to moving are so loose, you'll think you're jumping straight ahead and you'll end up just veering off to the side and falling to your death over and over again. Sometimes it's even hard to figure out where you need to go because the environments are so blocky and undetailed. There's been times where I've been stuck in a level for at least a half an hour trying to figure out where to go. And then once I find out that the answer was right in front of me, it was just because something looked like a wall and it turned out it was a door. Game design fail. Take nightmare creatures, take out everything that might have made that game fun, throw a Fifth Element skin on it, and you have a game. I do not recommend this one at all. And the only reason I have it is, once again, I love the movie, so I can also say I own the game.
Unbelievable!
So now let's hear from my final pair of guests, Michael B. the Game Genie and Kinsey Burke.
Hi everybody. Michael B. the Game Genie here. I make videos on YouTube. Chris asked me to stop by to talk about bad game based on a movie. I have a problem with that because I actually like a lot of the movie-based games more than I probably should, so I don't know if I can answer. But the more I thought about it, something came to mind. There's one movie-based game so bad, even I'll complain about it. Growing up, there was one certain thing about Batman movies and their tie-in games. They were great. That is until Batman Forever was released. While the movie wasn't great, the game was another level of garbage all unto its own. Instead of sticking with the visually stunning art style presented at Batman Returns on the Super Nintendo, they instead tried to cash in on the latest trend at the time, which was digitized actors. This should have been cool, but it made everything extremely dark and hard to see. Speaking of hard to see, there are intentionally things in the foreground that give you an obstructed view of the game. If you can't see, how are you supposed to control the game? Well, the obstructed view isn't the biggest concern there, as the controls are terrible. Sticking with the digitized style, which was made famous in fighting games, they also gave similar controls to Batman Forever. Meaning, of course, you have to press up to jump. Yeah, up to jump. My biggest issue with the controls isn't even that, but there are areas where you can only proceed by using your grappling hook to go up to the next level, but you know what? It isn't clear where you have to use it. Even when you figure it out, it still doesn't get any better because it's a task upon itself to figure out how to control the hook to do so anyways. Once you get the controls figured out and overcome the darkness of the game, you have a pretty bland side-scroller ahead of you, once it loads. This is a cartridge-based game. Why is there loading? I get that you are using pre-rendered sprites, but if a beautiful game like Donkey Kong Country doesn't need you to load every minute, then why does this garbage? So yeah, Batman Forever. I don't like it.
Hey guys, Kinsey here, and when I was asked to pick a craptastic game based on a movie,
so many ideas came into my head because, I mean, let's be real, there's a lot of really crappy video games based on movies. It's like a thing now. So what I decided to do was to pick one that's also based on a crappy movie. So my pick is Cool World. And I actually remember when this movie came out, because I was still a little bit too young for it, but I loved Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And I thought this was like the older, sexy adult version of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And so then, like, you know, years later, I finally watched it, and I was just like, what is this? It's not as good as Who Framed Roger Rabbit, like, at all. So, and of course, you know, they made an NES game based off of it, because it was 1993, and that's what they did. But the game is also not great. The level design is really weird and unintuitive. The sound is really, like, not great, especially for being this late in the NES's lifespan. Like, there's a lot of NES games with better music than this one. Like, the controls are really weird. Like, some of the weapons you get, one's an eraser, and you erase the doodles with it, which is probably the most intuitive, ingenious thing about this whole game, because it's like a comic strip and whatnot. But anyways, but it would work a lot better if it worked some of the time. So since it's on the NES, a lot of the buttons on the controller do a little bit of double duty. So a lot of the times you go to attack and you end up doing the other thing, and it's kind of frustrating. And even the very first level when you get there, well, first of all, you have to pick up your main weapon, which is a pen, and that's irritating, because the first time I walked through the level, I missed it, and I was like, what is happening? So, yeah, there's that. But it's a basic kind of platformer, side-scroller thing, like when you first start, but when you get to the end of that world, it just ends, and there's, like, nothing. So, you have to go back, and of course you have to push that garbage can and blow it up, of course. So it does a little bit of that, like, old adventure game thing where it uses items where you might not think of it, which sounds kind of fun and ingenious and puzzly, but in this case, it's not. It's horrible. So, I mean, if you liked Cool World the movie, I'm sure there's people out there who did, then you'll probably like this game, maybe, but probably not. So yeah, it is definitely not a sexy Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and that is for sure. So thank you very much to the Old Ass Retro Gamer for having me on your channel.
Be content with the cards you've been dealt.
And for my final game, if you've been watching my channel since the beginning, you might have a hint as to what game this is, because one of my earliest videos was a rant about this game. It's also one of my most popular videos, which shocks the hell out of me. Mad Max for the NES. I'll put the link to the rant in the description below if you want to see the long version of it, where I go into more detail, but I'll give you the short version of that rant right now. When I was in high school in the early 90s, my father won a contest at the Mindscape headquarters, which was about a town over from where we lived. And the prize was to beta test Mad Max for the NES. So I was given a Famicom and a beta copy of Mad Max. I had to play it for a month and then come back for a focus group and tell them what I thought, and in return I would get 2 free games from Mindscape's catalog. I hated the game. I told the people at the focus group how much I hated it and what I thought they could change to make it better, as I was a huge fan of the Mad Max series. They seemed to be interested. Turns out they weren't. And about 2 months later, they released the exact same game I beta tested with absolutely nothing done to it. And to top it all off, they shafted me on one of the games they were supposed to give me, because I picked 2 games that hadn't been released yet, and they promised they would mail them to me when they were available, and they didn't. So, F you, Mindscape! And what is it about this game that I hate? Try everything. Let's start with the graphics. Everything is washed out, fugly, and there's only 3 types of levels that you can play through in this game. There are the outdoor driving levels, there are the cave levels, and then there are these arena levels. Each of them looks exactly the same as every other one, with just the color palette swapped out. The car controls like gas and slips and slides all over the road, which is amplified to the extreme in those arena matches because you're basically on a path that you cannot veer off of, otherwise you're going to fall to your death. The levels where you're on foot aren't that hard. The driving levels are where it's a pain in the ass. When it comes to the music, there's only 2 tracks looped over and over again throughout the entire game, and they are grating on the nerves. But the worst aspect of this game is how vague it is and how you are not given any clues as to what you need to do to proceed through the game. You need to have food and water to barter with. Where do you get food and water from? They don't tell you. You kind of have to like drive off-road as much as possible to try to find these caves where all that stuff is located, but there's no way to know they're there. Most of the time you find them by accident. It is not fun at all. And when was Max's weapon sticks of dynamite? Because when he's driving his car, that's the only weapon he has, is he throws sticks of dynamite out the window, which is stupid. At least he has a shotgun in the mines. It doesn't use the license well, which is what my biggest problem was when I first beta tested this game. It's like they just bought the license to Mad Max and just didn't do anything with it. It was just a generic game that doesn't even feel like it belongs in the Mad Max universe. And I told them, if you were going to make a game based on Mad Max, it should be about Max versus the motorcycle gang from the first film. That way you could at least have sequels to this game down the road. But they did throw a couple of characters from Thunderdome in here for no reason whatsoever, and I said, if you're going to at least have that in here, why can't there be a Thunderdome level? And they looked like they were so interested when I suggested that I thought there was actually going to be a Thunderdome level in the game. Plenty of potential, squandered. It's like there was just no effort put into this game. Mindscape bought the license to Mad Max, quickly threw together a game. The only thing they seemed to put any effort into was the sound effects. There's these real samples of screeching tires and guns and car crashes. Outside of Ocean, Mindscape is one of my least favorite developers. They only made, out of their entire catalog, made 3 games that I enjoy. This is not one of them, for good reason. This is the video game equivalent of gonorrhea.
Oh, yes, I did.
So I want to thank each and every one of my special guests that participated in this collaboration. I love doing collaborations with other YouTubers, as you well know, but you are all awesome, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking time out of your schedules to film a little segment for me. I'm super appreciative, you have no idea. And I will leave the links to their channels in the description below, so check each and every one of them out and give them a sub if you haven't already. Everybody in this video has given you great examples of a crappy game based on a movie. What are some of yours? I really want to know, and I'm sure everyone else that participated wants to know as well. And until next time, I am Chris the Old Ass Retro Gamer signing off.